Good evening and welcome to Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haines of Sky High and Fly Jump Camps fame. It's Friday, January 26th. The year's 2024, and we are coming up on another Olympics, which I'm greatly looking forward to. Tonight, my guest is Brad Kearns. He is a dynamo of a man. Brad's site on Instagram has much information on it. If you look at him at Brad Kearns one, peak performance with a passion. He's all about nutrition and has a very unique background in triathlons. He was an endurance athlete, an incredibly high level one, and has now transitioned into speed golf. He's the world record holder. He's got a speed golf world record, and he is also a master's level competitor. He's a high jumper and a sprinter. So, incredibly rich background. He's got information on nutrition, how to clean up your nutrition, how to make your life better, not just for training, but just for general health. And so we are looking forward to talking with Brad as soon as we get him in the room. So stay tuned for the next episode of Raise the Bar with Brad Kearns, our special guest. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Troy?
I'm good, Brad. It's a pleasure meeting you finally.
Well, I think we met at Santa Monica High in 2020 or
Really
2021 at the all-comers meet at the high jump facility.
awesome.
Weren't
Good
you
to know.
there?
I'm sure I was. I've
Yeah.
been a lot of places these last 3 years, bounced around
Uh,
different high schools.
you
Yeah.
gave me a good tip to try to cross the right knee across the body on
Uh-huh.
takeoff to kind of, I guess, initiate the bend.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just did a post the other day on how I was looking at I'm clearing out videos on all my devices. My phone is loaded,
Yeah.
keeps giving me error messages, so I'm going back and dumping out old videos and both of my iPads are almost full. So and it's weird because the high jump is only what 5 seconds long. So
Still here.
all
I
right.
have a hard wire here in the house that I use for podcasts, so it's
Oh,
better
awesome.
connection. Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah, you're
Ethernet
way
cable running across the wall. Yeah.
well, I see your picture of you up there high jumping. So you've got the high jumping connection with me that I didn't know about. And then so Brad, we're sharing here on Raise the Bar, and we're talking with Brad Kearns, who's my guest. And I'm guessing now, you told me that something of interest to you and a passion of yours is to continue to work your magic on nutrition with older athletes. So trying to extend the careers and improve the careers of masters level competitors. And I'm guessing now, seeing your picture, I didn't know this that that's you competing. So are you still competing in the high jump and other things? Are you doing the decathlon? Are you just jumps, or what are you doing?
Oh my gosh, I love the high jump so much. So I'm so glad to join you here on the show with the two best backgrounds, if anyone's watching on video, that you could ever imagine. A couple people bending over that bar. Now,
Right,
unlike you, Troy, I'm just a dilettante, a novice, but I have so much fun pursuing a completely disparate goal from what I did my whole competitive life. I was an endurance athlete when I
hmm
was a high school runner. I was 12th in National Junior Olympics. I was ninth in California State Finals. I went and tried to run at D1 and kept getting injured at UC Santa
mm,
Barbara. And I found this wonderful sport of triathlon way back in the 80s when it was just getting going.
right.
And that was a wonderful journey. I competed 9 years on the pro circuit. I
Wow.
was national champ. I was number three in the world at my best. I also got my butt kicked a lot, and I learned a lot of lessons about success and failure and how to manage your competitive intensity rather than just be the badass every day that could train harder than anyone else, because that's a good
Right.
way to lead to disappointment.
Sure.
But all those lessons I learned led to a long time career in health, fitness, peak performance, as an author mainly, podcast host, coach, all that kind of fun stuff. So to answer your original question, I transitioned after my endurance days were over into pursuing goals that were more aligned with longevity and with health rather than inherently compromising health, which is basically what a triathlete is someone who has to push themselves so hard and train in a manner that, is in direct opposition to hormone balance and recovery and so forth. So that was a young person's game. I did it really hard, but now my goals are quite different. I've been fond of the sport of speed golf, which we can talk about if you're interested.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and also with Masters Track, I love sprinting. Now I'm destined to get my butt kicked by the guys who are at the top and true sprinters, and especially a high jumper. I have a natural disadvantage from having those endurance athlete genes, but
Hmm.
I just always enjoyed it, and even back in high school, I would go after running those crazy interval workouts around the track. I'd always head over to the high jump pit and practice with the girls when the bar was low enough for me to participate. And for some reason, it's been a lifelong passion that now I get to put at center stage because I no longer have any interest in doing the crazy endurance stuff that I did decades ago.
Wow. That's a lot of information in one time. Pardon me, I'm sorry. I have a really dry throat tonight. I don't know what's going on. I took a shingles booster or
Oh
second part
boy.
of shingles vaccine 2 days ago. And I think it's messing with me a little bit. But no, a lot of information there. And man, my brain immediately jumped out with a ton of questions. Now, when you started working on now, are we talking just nutrition, the way that you attacked it with um yeah, I remember learning so much as an undergraduate at UCLA in kinesiology, and we didn't spend a lot of time on nutrition. A lot
Mm,
of the stuff that I remember about nutrition is just antiquated now because I remember reading a book that was all about carbos. It was all about, like the new diet was you should just carb load all the time.
right. That was the
So early
whatever
80s,
era
right?
that was, 80s,
Early,
90s, and
yeah,
yeah,
early 80s. So I was eating pizza and I was eating a lot of pasta and rice and all that stuff. And then
yeah.
that I think it opened the door and a lot of people were interested because there's a lot of books that got sold and everybody just started jumping in there. And then of course what happens then is somebody else is either trying to sell a book and debunk what was said, or somebody
Mm,
else has a new little piece of the puzzle that comes up and says, hey, you still should be eating some protein because, or, she'll still should be doing this. And, you mentioned that being in the extreme world of, and congratulations, by the way, on an amazing career in that, being so highly ranked and, I lost track of all the accolades as you're going through, but it all sounded really high up and really involved. And like I said, training so hard when you're pushing those extremes in the Ironman. I'm sure some of you out there remember pictures. I don't even remember the one gal's name, but I remember the one gal that just collapsed like
yeah.
50 yards from the
Actually,
finish line,
it's so funny. You're talking about Julie Moss on Wide World of Sports in
Mhm.
1982, but in subsequent years, two other athletes dramatically collapsed just yards before the finish. One of them was Paula Newby-Fraser, the greatest Ironman triathlete of all time, with 31 international victories. And
Wow.
she just as a little aside for fun, because I know you like to talk about the mental training aspects, but
Hmm.
she announced before the race this would be her retirement race and she was going to go out on top with a wonderful victory. And she collapsed, 100 meters from the finish in downtown Kailua Kona and stay on the ground for about 15 minutes. And then she got up and staggered across the line at fourth. And it was such a strange circumstance to think, here's someone going for 140 miles on the lava fields
Right.
through the heat and persevering to win the world championships at the fast pace. But she can't make it another 100 meters. And I think sometimes the brain did not she was not ready to end her career and transition to the next phase of her life.
Right.
Therefore, by coming in fourth place, she still got her act together and got up and crossed the line. She wasn't taken to the hospital in an ambulance,
Right.
but with that type of unfinished business, that bought her another year in the sport. So that was you mentioned
Wow.
collapsing at the finish line of the Ironman, and
Wow.
you could be talking about numerous other Jan Ripple and Wendy Ingram both collapsed next to each other and all kinds of crazy stuff. in that sport. And it was a fun, interesting phase of my life to be pushing the boundaries of endurance. And now
Mhm.
it would be so awesome if I could make like the national level in the 400 meters. So I could say I was once the Ironman. I still am the
Right.
Ironman record holder for my age group, 24 and under, set back in 1989. But if I could go all the way to the other extreme and put up a good high jump mark,
Hmm.
that would be pretty awesome. And I'm looking forward to getting your
400
help. I
or
just
yeah.
enrolled in your course. Yeah, man.
Yeah, just let me know. We'll get to work. I'm still
Yeah.
out in this area. But getting back to what you're talking about, Brad, this opens up such a huge area in my mind because, here on Raise the Bar, we're interested in the same way that you were in pushing your performance to the highest possible level. So we talk, weight training and flexibility and plyometrics and speed agility and sports psychology that you mentioned and how the brain is involved, and then what do you eat, how do you eat, and when you train, how does it change throughout, and all that. And I remember, gosh, one of the first things I heard that was just funky to me was that, for the distance runners, when they were starting to run marathons now, which is amazing to me because guys can run for 26 miles and rub sun 26 straight sub 5 minute miles and run it
Oh,
in 2 hours, right? Or
434 is
434, right?
Kipchoge's record. And
That's
so
amazingly
if
fast.
anyone wants to go to a high school track and try to run a
One of those, yeah.
68.5
Hmm.
or try to run one straightaway in
Yeah.
17,
Yeah.
and it blows the mind how someone can run,
Just
you
keep doing
know,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
across town at
Right.
that pace. Yeah.
26
But
miles. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the original
Um,
guy they named the marathon after died when he delivered the message, right?
it's
When he showed up.
yeah, don't get me started on the inherent disconnect between health and extreme endurance performance, and it's just a tough way to go. So that's why, like we talked about at the start of the show, at whatever age and whatever is, interesting with your competitive passions, you can find a way to maintain that competitive edge and that excitement throughout your life. Even if you don't want to go and participate in a formal competition, you can get into the CrossFit community, for example, where
Right.
they put up your times on the whiteboard and you just feel that sense of accomplishment. Because what I've seen, and probably you've seen too, mixing with our old time athletic buddies, we can like to tell a lot of stories of back in the day this, back in the day that, and then we sit and watch the NFL for 9 hours on Sunday, and we're pretty much a spectator in life that can't be bothered to walk the dog around the block if it's a little
Right.
drizzly. So that's kind of what I stand for is like keep striving, change your competitive goals if you're inclined, and keep things
Hmm.
fresh and interesting and stimulating. But you mentioned nutrition a couple times, and for the past 15 years or so, I've been working closely with Mark Sisson to promote the ancestral health movement, the primal paleo, and that's been a really, I think, a great immersion into mainstream community where this message that we should honor the example of our hunter-gatherer ancestors in evolutionary biology and consume the foods that humans were meant to eat. It's pretty undisputable, and it's led to a lot of good transitions away from what we call the standard American diet, SAD, where we have widely excess consumption of processed foods,
Hmm.
namely the processed carbohydrates that you rattled off that we were
Right.
told to eat back in the 80s. And so now we kind of, unfortunately, 40 years later, we still have that confusion and controversy that you mentioned, such that next week you might get someone on here who's arguing strongly that we should all be plant-based and we should avoid these horrible things like eggs and meat.
Right.
And I'm going to say, look, being so deeply immersed in this and written so many books, book after book and published books from other authors in the last 15 years, what I like to do now with the opportunity is to kind of try to find some common ground and some common sense rather than wading into the nuances and the points that are able to be argued and debated. So
Hmm.
the way I like to start the conversation is that we have a critical obligation today to eliminate processed foods if we want to take care of our body and optimize our longevity potential. And it's pretty difficult because we're surrounded with refined grain sugars and
Yeah.
industrial seed oils and all the products that are made with that, the fast food, the frozen packaged food. But if someone can simply do that by any means necessary. And that could be, hey, I'm going on a brown rice and celery juice cleanse for 7 days and I feel so good. Good luck sustaining something like that. But you've just shown that you've disengaged from this unfettered access to indulgent and heavily processed foods. So you have the potential to increase your awareness and start to surround yourself with natural, nutritious foods. And it's not as complicated or as daunting as a lot of people might think to just clean up your diet and
Mhm.
enjoy the best sourcing that you can get. You don't have to break your back to make sure everything's organic or grass fed, but we got to take steps away from this immersion into fast food culture.
Yeah. Well, that's again my hearing that it makes the most sense to me, and it's funny because being an athlete at UCLA and all that, and I remember even when I got off campus, and probably especially when I got off campus, because when you're living in campus still, you just go down to the dorms, and you would eat in the cafeteria, and they fed us okay, but I'm sure there was some things in there that weren't very good for you either. But once I was out of the dorms and living off campus, now I'm in charge. I didn't
Hmm.
have a food card. I didn't go back to the dorm. So I would go to Ralph's and buy, and I would get fresh lettuce and I would get carrots and I would, make salads. Now and then everybody would say, "Oh, salads are great for you, but you can't douse them in all that dressing." And I was one of those people. I'm like, well, I got to be able to taste it to eat it. So I would still put ranch on it and eat it. But I would buy chicken and turkey, and I think I was on the non-processed thing just because it was cheaper, to
Mm.
buy real food, than to buy anything that was packaged and all that. So that was part of the battle. I did still eat a lot of pasta and rug. I think it was not ragu, but Prego. I think you could
Hmm.
get big jugs of Prego back then, but a reasonable attempt. And then yeah, as I've gotten older, that has definitely disappeared because, like you said, not only are we immersed in it, but it's just easier. It's less time consuming to go the short route. And then the other thing that I thought of when you said that was, yeah, there's been a lot of changes, obviously, and much more in the way of research done. But I started thinking of the nutrition as for a couple of different reasons. Number one, for building and maintaining a healthy body, like you said. So just on a straight up maintenance slash health. So, doing that, trying to stay around on the planet Earth longer and all that, that's one aspect. The other aspect was more aligned towards training, which, I would, in some ways, it has to be a little bit different. Like you're talking about the radical things that would happen. I don't even know, what you had to go through nutritionally to train for your Ironman, and for instance,
Mm.
because my event, and this lends credence to the fact that high jumpers are always considered lazier than everybody else. Everybody come by and the high jumpers are laying in the pit, right? And then they take their time warming up. They don't really warm up very well. They don't stretch. They just like to jump over stuff. And so, and I get those kids, they come out and I'm like, hey, you got to jog around, you got to stretch. I just want to jump. It's like, okay. Um, but training the body for one thing, and then the energy systems is another. Because my event was 4.5 seconds
Right.
tops. I mean, any other part of training was actually longer than the jump itself. So if I had to run sprints, running 100 meters was a way bigger energy output than it was, than the actual 4 seconds it takes to jump. Lifting weights, doing plyometrics, any of that stuff is a way more, energy requiring. So, with that, that was what I was thinking along the lines of, how does that change, what it is that you do? Because if you're training older athletes to get them ready for either speed golfing or another type of, I don't know if they still have Ironman triathlons for Do
Oh
they
yeah.
still have those for the
Unfortunately, they do.
they
I
still have
think
those?
the anyone over 50 should probably do a half Ironman and call it an Ironman. That's my contention. But
Right.
there's plenty of older athletes out there, yeah. And I think what you're getting at is when you're doing that extreme endurance performance and training for hours and hours, you have to restock glycogen every day, or
Right.
you're going to be in big trouble. You're going to wake up and you won't be able to go your 6 miles the next day or your 50-mile bike ride,
Hmm.
unlike a power athlete where you don't have that variable of a desperate need to restock glycogen. But even a power athlete, like a power lifter in the gym or a world-class high jumper training at that level, or even a Division One athlete that's going through a dedicated practice that's lasting for a couple hours, you're burning a lot of calories and you do have to replenish appropriately.
Yeah.
But one of the other concerns is just to get nutrient density to the maximum as an athlete. So, athletes can get away with the hot fudge sundae perhaps easier so than someone who eats a hot fudge sundae and goes back and sits at their desk.
Right.
However, you might also want to argue that an athlete should be the most picky and stringent about their diet because they're asking more from their body and they want to
Hmm.
perform and recover and they need to get their micronutrients dialed in and stay away from those junk calories that do not serve to improve performance and actually can cause things like systemic inflammation because the body has a difficult time processing all those chemicals and preservatives and processed sugars, and
Right.
particularly the refined industrial seed oils, also known as vegetable oils, which is probably the single worst thing that we can consume as humans. And it's prevalent in all restaurants, including not just fast food, but medium range chain restaurants and the finest restaurants around will still have these really nasty oils present in their preparation methods and the sauces and things that they make. And that's pretty shocking because the sole reason for using these is for cost savings. So you're talking about canola oil and soybean oil and corn oil and
Right.
things like that. And we really have to make a strong effort to eradicate those from the diet, especially in the home when you have a choice and you're aware. But if you're out and about and you want an omelet for breakfast, you can politely ask to get it cooked in butter rather than oil,
Hmm.
and just work your way away from these truly toxic uh, things that are prominent in most people's diet these days.
Right. Right. Well, man, it's so much information again. I like it though because I go to the Juliet Child School of Cooking, and you
Mm,
mentioned omelets, which is one of my favorites. So I answer most of my problems about cooking by dousing things in butter. So
mm.
it's like,
It
if it's
makes everything
sticking,
better.
first of all, more butter. If it doesn't taste right, more butter. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then being Italian, of course, I like my olive oil. So, and I know there's different levels of, you know, goodness on that stuff. So
Yeah.
you're reminding me of so much complexity, Brad, because I had on as a guest right towards the end of last season in April or May, I had Cynthia Monteleone on.
Right.
I don't know if you know who she is, the
Sure. Yeah. She's
47-year-old
she's
mother of three that, yeah,
world champ. Yeah, and she's
world
definitely
champ in the
dialed in.
400.
Yeah.
And she
Um,
said something about how she trained and, the way that she was able to compete like she was when she was 24 or whatever at 47 was because of diet and everything. And that
mhm.
she's very into, I don't know how you guys would compare, systems and the things that you believe in, but there's so many levels to it. I'm thinking like age and blood type, genetics. You got so many different things. Does it change at all when you're working with your
Um,
clientele? How do you go about what you do? Kind of interested in how you attack.
well, there's a lot of hype and gimmicks that have been promoted for the last 40 years, like you started talking about, and some of them are relating to um, our need to optimize according to our blood type and our ancestry. And there's a lot of valid points there. But
Hmm.
I think what happens a lot of times is we get carried away on these particulars or whatever the next best-selling book that hits the shelves with a gimmick, And it really can be more simplified down to first eliminating the processed foods with great effort and great care. So if anyone says everything in moderation when it comes to diet, I'm going to slap them because the today's average human is so pathetic. And United States of America, we are the fattest, sickest population in the
Yep.
history of humanity.
Yep.
Young males have a testosterone decline that's been going at a rate of 1% per year, average decline in testosterone levels since the 80s. So the jumpers at UCLA today,
Yeah.
decades after your group, are diminished in the most profound way possible for their essential function as human beings due to a lot of people are blaming the environment and the EMF stuck to our phone all the time, the
Right.
plastics that are in our food and drink, and also the diminished dietary quality from generations ago when we still hung on. I'm in my 50s, and we can remember those days before we had unfettered access to indulgent foods, and we had home cooked meals, and there was less of the processing and the industrialization of products
Right.
like meat that a lot of people criticize. But back to Cynthia, I love what she's doing, and she's promoting this animal-based diet because that's where the most nutrient-dense foods are found, and that's strongly referencing and inspiring, honored by the ancestral health model. And that's what
Hmm.
I've been working hard to promote for many years too. And so, again, if next week you have the debate continues with someone completely refuting this,
Right.
I'm going to stand proud and say it's really, really difficult to counter the longest and most stringent scientific study of all time, and that's human evolution. So for 2 million years, we have evolved eating a very small list of foods. And if anyone wants to take notes, I'm going to recite them right now. It's meat, fish, fowl, eggs, vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds. And we also ate insects until recent
Right.
times, and a lot of humans still do. So if you think about, the animal-based diet is what allowed us to evolve away from our ape cousins and get strong brains because we were able to hunt and access nutrient-dense foods. Today, without dispute, you can do a macronutrient analysis and you can Google something like kale versus liver and find liver being arguably the most nutritious food in terms of just a pure nutrient analysis under a microscope and see that the animal-based foods have the most nutrition. So I eat a lot of eggs, I eat a lot of red meat, which is vastly superior fatty acid and overall nutrition profile to chicken and fish. So when
Right.
you hear someone say, "Yeah, I'm trying to clean up my diet and I don't eat red
Without red
meat, I
meat.
just eat chicken and fish." Well, today's fish are really, there's a lot of concerns about sustainability and polluted waters and
Sure.
getting access to heavy metals and just inferior nutrition from the over-farmed salmon and shrimp, the two most common fish that we eat. And
Right.
so red meat is the highest ranked in that respect. And the cows are much better off than the pigs and the chicken in industrialized farming as well. So just trying
Yeah.
to flip some of these notions that are flawed on their end. And same with the other foods I mentioned. It's going to be really hard to dispute that those are going to send you to the hospital. And the average number of prescriptions that Americans have, I think, is 14 or 17 right now. So if you open up the
Yeah.
cabinet, you're not going to get into deep, deep trouble with your health if you're emphasizing those natural, nutritious foods in as clean a state as possible, minimally processed, right? You can say, I'm eating chicken when you're eating chicken McNuggets. That's a big difference from
Sure.
going for the cleanest sources. So that's pretty simple. We can get into more details, but I think the best takeaway for most people is that, um, the restrictive diets that are so popular. I've written books about the ketogenic diet. It's
Hmm.
wonderful, and it has all these metabolic benefits and anti-inflammatory and brain boosting benefits. However, it's simply kind of a mechanism or a tool to escape from this unregulated diet. And so if
Right.
you have the concern and the care to restrict your carbs, you're benefiting from getting rid of the cereals and the pastas and the breads. but it's not necessarily sustainable to avoid the natural nutritious carbs like fruits and sweet potatoes and honey and things that are easy to digest and have good nutritional value. So
Yeah,
it's, do what you got to do to clean up your diet and find something that's enjoyable and sustainable to you. Oops, we almost forgot to put that on the list of important dietary attributes because if you're not really feeling it and it's a real chore and it's a struggle, you're going to have a hard time adhering to the
sure.
most greatest recommended diet from your custom nutritional formulator.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now, Brad, how would somebody, because this brings up you, and I'm not even sure. I'm never sure how I get the people that I get when I'm looking on Instagram. Because if you've heard the podcast before out there, you know that the way that I make all my Instagram connections is just by looking at my feed and then noticing what people are doing. And sometimes, you can't help. And I saw you had a large number of followers, and then I didn't look into any great details, but if anybody is, hopefully lots of people listening to the podcast, and they want
Mhm.
to talk with you about how to do this in their lives. If athlete, non-athlete, they want to feel healthier, they want to lose weight, they want to, anything like that. How would they go about doing that with someone like yourself? Is there a book? Do you like recommend them to books, or do they come to you and you do an analysis? And what kind of services do you offer, and how would they get in touch with you?
Well, thanks, Troy. I'm not really doing a lot of one-on-one work anymore. I did that in my past. I'm busy writing books and hosting the Be Rad podcast. So I would turn people over there to listen to
Mhm.
some of the great shows and the great guests that we've had. I also have some free resources on my website, which is bradkearns.com, and you can download a PDF chart where I rank the most nutritious foods on earth, the categories, and you can print this thing out and tape it on your fridge and just get a sense of the nutrient density of the choices that you're making. Because if you're going along having salads, oatmeal for breakfast and salad for lunch, and some broccoli and a chicken for dinner. You might be missing out on some of those categories above that, like the red meat and the organ meats and the oily cold water fish and the pasture raised eggs, things that are vastly nutritionally superior to, say, a bowl of oatmeal, which it's not going to kill you, but it does not have a tremendous amount of nutrition.
Mhm.
And other than that, we can argue all we want about particulars, but if you can kind of put that focus on, hey, I need to get some superfoods in my diet, and that will be a way to, first step is ditch the processed foods. The second step is to try to emphasize meals that are going to give you a lot of nutrition, especially if you're active, energetic, athletic, and interested in performing, recovering, not getting injured, things like
Yeah,
that. So I love Cynthia's quip that she uses a lot where her pre-race meal is a frickin' steak. And
yeah,
then she goes out and runs at world level in the 400 meters.
right.
And there's probably people that can say, well, technically speaking, that's not giving her the carbohydrate values that you need to, but she knows what she's doing, and she's very highly adapted to nutrient dense diet and has dialed in the macronutrients for her purposes. And also, speaking of the athlete performing at a high level, you kind of have a different set of decision-making parameters with diet versus someone who is carrying a spare tire, and that's the accumulation of visceral fat, which is especially dangerous. And it's a sure sign of metabolic and hormonal problems in the
Hmm.
human. And it happens as we age, and everyone thinks it's normal, but it is a pure sign of accelerated aging that we really have to fight against. And there's, multi-tiered format to fight this battle. One of them is to get sufficient sleep. The other one is ditching those processed foods, getting a sensible exercise training schedule, and avoiding overdoing it, like I mentioned with a lot of endurance athletes who are
Right.
pushing themselves too hard. But cleaning up one's overall lifestyle and diet is going to take perhaps some restriction and regimentation. Whereas an athlete who's already got a six pack, the blood work looks good, and they just want to improve their time, they don't have to mess around with regimens like keto. They just have to figure out, and I don't think any Olympic athletes, there's almost no record of an Olympic or elite professional athlete following any of these very popular regimented restrictive diets like plant-based, like keto, like
Yeah.
intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding. It just doesn't happen in the elite athletic world. And that's an important notion for, let's say, a female collegiate runner who's putting in a lot of miles and then heard about the ketogenic diet to help lose weight. That's going to be a very, very high risk ordeal for someone who's trying to perform at a high level and then is told not to eat that oatmeal and instead fast until 12 noon. And
Yeah.
we've seen a lot of disastrous effects, especially with the female athletic population where they're undernourished and
Right.
have that it's REDS, the energy deficiency in sport.
Hmm. Wow. So yeah, and you brought up a bunch of things there because number one for an athlete, you've got to maintain your protein. So if you're
Hmm.
working out hard, you're destroying your muscle tissue basically, which is the stimulus for your body to rebuild it stronger so that it can take more in the future, right? So you've got to have a high level of protein coming in. And like you're saying, a lot of people have been like, well, you've got your vegans and your pescatarians and you've got all kinds of different people, but you've got basically those that say, well, plants are the pure, you shouldn't be eating animal fat or animal meat that has high fat in it. And, some of those things have come about because we had so many of, and still do have so many Americans that are dropping dead of heart attacks and all that stuff. And, we all remember or should remember those commercials where they showed the egg getting let out of jail, right? Because some of the research was saying, well, you got high cholesterol and eggs have cholesterol, so you can't eat eggs. And, high cholesterol leads to this. And, what we found was that people weren't looking at enough of the variables. They were looking at one piece and they found a correlation and they said, well, therefore, this is what that is. What they didn't realize was that a lot of people that were eating that had high cholesterol were also smoking and drinking and not exercising. Right. And they had, excuse me, there were many other causative factors in their developing of this killer disease. We're still losing people all the time in this country due to that. And so it's interesting because I know some of the research that started with the heart disease here, you expand that over and you go, well, what is it with some of the other countries in the world? They don't have the same rates, as here. You say, what about Japan? They don't have the same number of people dropping dead from heart attacks all the time. He said, why is that? And he said, well, they eat fish, they eat, a lot more vegetables, they prepare it differently, you go on and on. You say, yeah, but they smoke. Yeah, they smoke like chimneys. What kills most of them is lung cancer.
Mm.
Still, they're not having as much trouble with the things that we do based on what it is that you eat, how you eat it, and also the other factors. So I know a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, some people out there are probably listening going, yeah, but I thought I heard, this causes this. And I find it all knowing just enough to be dangerous. It's like I get confused myself. And that's why I like talking, with you and with Cynthia and, people that really know, have done their research and everything else. Is there are a lot of variables involved, from different age ranges and, how much you're working out and all that stuff that comes in there. And I understand what you said before. We can save a lot of steps by just doing this as a the first basics. Let's get rid of processed foods and all that. But I keep thinking the energy requirements that you're talking about are both regenerative, regenerative.
Got it.
Three times
Nailed.
regenerative. It's regenerative and again energy, right? So if you've got a high energy requirement, you have you need to be alert, you need to be sharp, you need to be all these different things. Say you're, I don't know, a pilot. You're flying planes and you have people's lives in your hands and you got to know what you're doing. You got to be paying attention. You got to be in some kind of a level of fitness. I'm sure not all pilots are, perfectly fit, but I do remember seeing a lot of pilots that look like they're still in pretty good shape, so I don't know if that's a requirement, but if you've got, energy requirements and maintenance requirements and all this, my brain keeps coming back to, I'm like, see, and I was a product that my problem is I like sugary stuff. So I'm like Will Ferrell and Elf. My four favorite food groups are candy cane, candy corns, it's syrup and sugar. So it's like
Yeah.
um I have trouble with that because I just get that sweet tooth thing. Like if I'm going to drink something and it's either water or it's something that is watery, I'd rather have like orange juice because it's sweet. That's me. But like my brain just goes, well, if it doesn't taste good or if it doesn't have some sugar in it, how am I going to get any energy out of it? But like you said, you've got so many things that go into that. And I know the body's amazing at changing things into different things. So, if you have the building blocks, like you said, for amino acids and muscles, you've got what, 20 amino acids, and there's 12 and 8, right? The essential and non-essential. So I remember asking my doctor one time a long time ago, and he was just like you. He made things very simple. I said, well, I want to make sure I'm getting all my amino acids. And he said, well, then just eat an animal product. Because he goes, if you're getting picky and you're trying to get your protein needs met and you're not eating animal protein, then it's going to be harder for you because not everything that you eat that is green and leafy and has protein in it, you still might not cover all of the essentials, right? Because you have to have the essentials. The non-essentials you can make yourself out of whatever if you have the other pieces. But the essential ones you're going to miss. And he always told me, he goes, if you eat an animal product, you're going to catch them all in one shot. So that, like you're talking about, it sounds more efficient, for that purpose. One thing I wanted to bring up real quick, because I don't want to let you go on without talking about the speed golf, because now you brought in high jumping, and I love golf. I would play golf every single day if I could get away with it. Now, I've heard about speed golf and I've never played it, but I am one of those people that thinks that there should be a shot clock on those guys, because as much as I love hearing Jordan Spieth talk to his caddy for 5 minutes about the shot, the other part of me just goes, could we put him on the clock, please, and make him pull the trigger? Because I've got other things I got to do today. I would like to see golf sped up so that, those guys just go hit the ball and tell the caddy, all right, catch up to me. I'm going to sprint up here and see what kind of lie I got and
Mm.
figure it out. Put them on instead of a 1.5 minute clock, put them on a 10-second clock. Like, let's speed this thing up and see who can really play, right? So how did you get into speed golf?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think it's the greatest sport on the planet that nobody's ever heard of.
Right.
And so just like it sounds, um, we have actual tournament competition where you count your strokes and you also add the number of minutes on the course. So you add your strokes and your minutes together to get a speed golf score.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I've played in the World Championships 5 times and traveled all over and a very small circuit of players that are really, really good and love
Mm-hmm.
to go and do these events that we have occasionally. And my best score in speed golf is a 125. So if I'm walking away from the golf course and someone says, "How did you do?" and I say 125, that's not very impressive for a
They
regular
giggle, right? Because
golfer.
oh yeah, you're
Um,
like 40 over par, 50 over
yeah,
par.
but
Yeah.
in the tournament, I shot a 78 in 47 minutes, completing a championship 18-hole course. So I'm
Nice.
moving along at a good pace. And the essence of the sport is you can't rush and go crazy and hockey puck the ball into the hole because a stroke counts the same as a minute of running. and I
Right.
can run an entire par four, 330 yards or whatever, 380 yards in a minute, right? So
Right.
if I miss a short putt because I'm careless and I'm huffing and puffing and trying to be racing through the course, I'm going to get my butt kicked by a good golfer. And in
Right.
fact, the best speed golfers in the world, you won't even believe, they're under par and playing the entire course in 45 minutes or so.
Right.
Rob Hogan, the fastest guy from Ireland, plays an 18-hole course, 6,000-yard course in 34, 35 minutes. So
Wow.
it's a beautiful sport with some really amazing athletic endeavors there at the front of the pack. But for anybody, just like you described, the frustration of how long the sport takes, and
Hmm.
also um, golf is frustrating because you tend to get overly analytical and too much in your head
Right.
and ruminating about the mistakes that you just made, or you're worried about the water in front of the green and you're worried about what's going to happen on your next shot. In speed golf, you don't have time for your head to get in the way. So it's a
Right.
very reactive and kind of a Zen-like sport where you're just running down the course. You get to your ball, you look at your target, you pick a club, and we take the little junior golf bags that have 4 or 5 or 6 clubs in there so we
Right.
can run at a good speed. So you pull not even the right club for the shot. So you got to learn all these in between shots and modify on the fly and choke down or
Right.
do whatever. But you just take a look and you swing, and whatever your shot is, good or bad, you grab your bag and you
You're
run
already
after
moving.
it.
Yeah.
And if you're in the bushes, that's okay because guess what? Pretty soon you're going to get there, chip out, and carry
Yeah.
on with your round. And so, what the amazing thing that's found in tournament play is just about every player shoots a score that's as good or better than when they take 5 hours with the caddy reading
Hmm.
their putts and their 14 clubs. And it's
Right.
because you're free from that damaging, overly analytical mindset. It's
Yeah.
the same for when you're talking to Willie Banks and he's talking about getting the crowd to do rhythmic clapping and he's
Right.
just going with the flow and bouncing to his headphones. He's not replaying the last 7 tips from his triple jump coach to
Right.
remember to point his left arm at takeoff. It's nonsense. The athlete has to perform when they're in the flow, and the speed golfer gets in the flow automatically. So I highly recommend anyone who wants to try it out, even if you've just played around and it's getting near dark and you're having drinks in the clubhouse, go out there, grab a couple clubs, and jog 2 or 3 holes, and you'll immediately experience this, this Zen-like state of mind
Hmm.
when you're running after your ball.
Wow. Yeah. So you answered a couple questions that I had, which was number one, obviously you don't want to carry your full golf bag because my full golf bag that goes on either a push cart or a riding cart is a big bag with lots of
Yeah,
places to
here's
relax.
another
So
one. I to interrupt you, but like unless you are playing in single digit handicap, there is no need for 14 clubs because we're not good enough to
yeah.
pull that 7 iron to hit it 165 to 168 like we see on TV with the pros. And
Right.
so almost everyone could take a load off and just leave half your clubs at home and
Yeah.
try to hit the ball square on the face so that the ball goes straight. So anyway,
Hmm.
number one is yes, you need much fewer clubs, and that's a nice relief from regular golf.
Yeah. Can you save a club? Like, do you carry a putter or do you just putt with like a 2 iron or like is
Yeah,
it
there's so
worth
much
carrying the extra
strategy
weight?
involved. And
Yeah.
when you get to the tournament, like, usually you're playing a golf tournament, it takes 5 hours to play, and then they have the awards for an hour, and then you go home and you're tired and you've had too much cigar smoke and pretzels and potato chips
Right.
around. But
Right.
in speed golf, the round's over in less than an hour, and then we hang around the clubhouse and talk strategy for another hour or two
Right.
and all the fun things that people do. So there's guys playing with one club and they're really, really fast, but they're
Hmm.
scoring in the 90s instead of the 70s
Right.
because they don't have a wedge or a putter.
Right.
And I continue to experiment. One of the things that I optimized for was putting one-handed so I could hold on to my bag instead of putting it on greenside, running
Mm.
to putt, grabbing my
Running back.
bag, and running
Right.
to the next tee. And that saves me a few minutes every round. But putting one-handed's not quite as accurate, but if you practice a lot,
Yeah.
Tiger Woods does practice drills putting one-handed, as do a lot of the guys on the putting
Yeah.
green.
Yep.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? One of the things that occurred to me was how would this go with most of the courses around here that you play, how would you play? Because there's people in your way. So you
Yeah.
can't rush through the course. Do you have to be the first
No.
one to tee off,
Yeah,
or how does it
it's
go?
not a very social sport. That's a very astute question you have there because you will pretty much ruin everyone's day if you try to play with the real golfers. Because if you think about, look, I could play the whole course in 47 minutes, so I'm making the turn in 20 something minutes,
Right.
and I'm catching. So what you do is you're either the first guy off at sunrise, or more typically for me, I go down there a half an hour before dark and a lot of times the pro shop's closed or they just let me go for a reduced rate and I'll play the front nine in
Hmm.
30 minutes and then go home and have dinner. So it opens
Yeah.
up the sport to the busy working person who doesn't have those hours and hours available to practice and play. And
Right.
that's what's great about it is it's such a time efficient way to, you know, put in reps on the golf course and have a lot of fun and get a
Get a
great
workout.
workout instead of sitting in a cart.
Sure.
So it covers a lot of bases and it's a whole new challenge from that you can, take from having a passion. I've had a lifelong passion for golf and my whole family of golfers. And
Hmm.
this was something I really enjoy that was, especially appealing to me as an endurance athlete. But there's a whole group. I know you're based in Southern Cal and there's a guy named Garland Smith that runs this Speed Golf Southern California operation, and the passionate folks will meet at certain courses, like Tuesday morning at Westchester at 6:30 a.m., and you might see 8 people out there all
Hmm.
enjoying the first few tee times of the day. And of course, they're not going to, no one behind them is going to be bothered because they're out of
Yeah.
sight within a few minutes. And so,
Right.
yes, either first thing in the morning or right before dark when there's no one out there to bother.
Wow, there's so many things that you're saying that are appealing to me because I've for years have I've heard of the, one and two club tournaments where,
Mm.
you can pick any two clubs in your bag or any one club in your bag. And it reminds me of that commercial where the guy says, "Can you give me all your middle irons, please?" And it was Tony Finau and I think Annika Sorenstam were trying to
Mm.
play with like their driver only. He's like,
Mm.
yeah, you need to have it was something about a portfolio or something like you have to have a versatile portfolio. You can't just use one club or one strategy, right? But for yeah, the one or two clubs and I'm picturing that little carrying case, little triangle thing with the slots on it, right? So you've got your
Right. Yeah, yeah.
five clubs and then so do you like take every other third club take two out of the three out of your bag? Because I've done a couple times where I wanted to lighten my bag, so I took every other club and just played, if I was
Nice.
walking or something and I
Yeah.
didn't want to carry the extra weight. I've done
Yeah.
that before and I've noticed the same thing that you have. Like every once in a while, I'm not an expert golfer, but I do know that my 8 iron tends to go 150 yards if I hit it right, and that my 7 iron can go 160 or 165. But at the same time, there have been situations where I've pulled one or the other and managed to hit it, the right distance, like you're saying. So knowing that or knowing while you're playing, you're like, well, this would be a nice, comfortable 9 iron, but I've only got the 8. So
Yeah.
what do I do? And you said, like you said, you choke down or you make an adjustment. So once you have that mindset, then I think, like you're saying, if you're going to carry 4 or 5 clubs, you just got to start removing a pretty consistent kind of range out of the middle, right? I like it.
Yeah. What's exciting recently is this operation based out of New Zealand have designed a really beautiful and functional club called the Q Club with an adjustable face. And these kind of clubs have been around for a century, really. But this one is now a quite high performing club where you can grab the face and choose one of the adjustable notches, whereby you can have everything from a hybrid tee-off club of 17 or 18 degrees all the way to a 64-degree wedge, and you can make it a putter by shooting it all the way up to the top for a 4-degree putter, like a proper
Hmm.
putter. So I've been playing with this club where I don't even have a bag now. I just have some balls in my pocket and
Right.
one club, and it's going to speed up make it more easy to like have a novice come in and enjoy the game of golf, even if it's not speed golf. I like
Right.
the idea that the company's putting forth where if you're just a recreational player and you feel like there's all these logistics involved just to get started and tee up on the first tee of the executive course in your neighborhood, you can now just use one club and turn the notch and hit the ball. And so I'm changing my whole approach to speed golf to play with a single club, including learning how to putt with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because one of the guys that I like watching him for the last couple of years on the tour and with this LIV golf and everything, he disappeared and it bothers me because he bothers everybody else, but it's oh man, his name left me. Who's the rocket scientist with the big guns? He
Oh,
put on a bunch of weight.
DeChambeau.
DeChambeau. Oh, I love
Yeah,
DeChambeau because he's
yeah.
such an interesting character to me. So for people that don't know, this guy hits all of his irons are all the same length. So he has, your clubs tend to go, your longer irons tend to be longer. Your driver's your longest club. And then, everything in your bag tends to get shorter down to your wedges, right? So he made all of his the same length. And so he's hitting, the same exact length club as a 4 iron is down to his wedge. I don't know that he does all of them. I know there's a certain range that he does that with, which I find interesting. So, like what you're saying is, here I've got the same length club and I just keep adjusting the face. So you'd have to learn a lot of things, through practice, I'm sure, as far as how far, again, now you're back in charge of your yardages. You just have to figure out how to use this one club, right? Instead of carrying
Yeah.
all of them. Which makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. And it's the game of golf is overcomplicated, I think, and there's so much athleticism and natural intuitive sense of how to play that we
Hmm.
kind of suppress when we watch too many instructional videos or just get too tense out there.
Yeah.
For example, there's one anecdote about reading the greens. Hopefully, we're not boring the non-golfers listening, but the best way to read a green and the most profound way to read a green is when you first set foot on the green, your feet read the slope and sense the slope of the green, and
Hmm.
that is your most important feedback. And the rest of it's icing on the cake. But like when I'm running in a speed golf tournament and run up to the green and stand over my ball and I can barely breathe, I'm just trying to catch my breath and there's sweat going in my eyes, and I just swing that putter head. Invariably, I putt better, especially on the 45-foot putts, just using my natural ability and not thinking about anything, but just feeling what that break might be without even it registering in my brain.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you can draw parallels to, your best days in the high jump meets where,
Hmm.
you just clicked and you weren't thinking. You don't have
Not
time to
analyzing
think
or
once you're in the
overanalyzing. Yeah.
air. Yeah, you just let it happen. You let it unfold. Especially important for golfers because the mind is such a big factor,
The mind is a terrible thing, right? I love
for
that
most
that
golfers.
that
And you know
line.
what? The guys on TV are so fun to watch, but they set a terrible example for the viewer at home because we're not good enough to implement any of those strategies that those
Right.
guys use, especially discussing the particulars of the shot.
Hmm.
But their caddy's going to tell them that it's 163 instead of 165, and that's going to matter to them. But
Right.
when I play with players that are not accomplished, I'll even say like, hey, don't take a practice swing
Yeah,
because
you're
your
gonna ruin a
swing's
good.
not that good
Yeah.
anyway. What
Yeah.
you're practicing a crappy swing, just step up and hit the ball and don't think about anything.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't don't even waste it. Well, I always
Yeah.
think that I waste my best swings on my practice swing anyway.
Yeah, it could
Was
be.
it? I think Ben
Yeah.
Hogan said that. He said if most people could hit their first practice swing, they would be a lot better, because
Well,
like you
how
said, I
about
think
the
the tension is half of it.
yeah, how
You're
about the
trying to
mulligan,
hit.
Troy?
What was that?
How about the mulligan? If
Yeah.
you were allowed to hit your mulligan. I was once conversing with this guy on the phone that I did business with, and he told me he was a golfer. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I go, you're a serious player? What's your handicap? And he goes, well, I'm a 9, but Buster's a scratch. And I'm like, who's Buster? He goes, Buster's the name of the guy that hits the second ball when I drop one down after I'm frustrated with my first
Uh-huh.
shot. I'm like, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yep. the pressure's off, and that's how you want to hit your putt or your shot.
Yeah, yeah. Pressure's
Yeah.
off, and sometimes you get a valuable piece of feedback, whatever. Like there's all kinds of things I forget. Like when I'm standing on an uphill lie, if the
Mm.
ball's above my feet, that I'm gonna
Yeah.
hook it left, just
Right,
because
right.
of all that. And so there's so many times I'll walk up and I'm like, oh, it's 150 and it's above my feet, and I forget. And I've been golfing for a long time, and I'll forget.
Mm.
I grab the club and I'm aiming it right in the middle of the green, and I pull it left. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I look down at the ball and I'm like, dang it, it's above your feet again. Like there's the evidence. It happens every time. So I'm like, and then of
Yeah.
course, as soon as I change clubs and aim more right, then I just hit it straight right. So I don't know. I don't know how that all works, but
That's why we're always back out at the course thinking we can do better next time. I love it.
yes, that is
Yeah.
the great adage of golf is what's that one? That one will get you coming back. Like you make
Yeah.
one birdie on the last hole. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that'll make you come back. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
great sport, but yeah, the way that it's packaged on TV, I know why it's frustrating for people that aren't golfers because I mean, I like golf and there's times when I find it boring. Now, if it's the Masters, I'm going to suffer through everything because I want to see every inch of the
Hmm.
course and I love the drama. But, on the normal just week to week, yeah, it can be kind of like, ugh, really? 18 holes of these guys just walking around and telling you about, oh, there's the same looking swing, they all hit the ball pretty far. It's like, so yeah, it'd be nice to speed it all up. That's what I think.
Okay. Everybody try it sometime. You'll love it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about you and your competition now. I changed my mindset quite a few years back when I stopped jumping. My new competitive sport became golf, and I never
Wow.
got very, very good at it. I think the lowest I ever got my handicap down to was like a 5 for a while, and that was when I was
Wow.
playing a lot. Now, being busy in business and life, I've kind of gone the other direction for a while. I went through a couple month period a few months ago. I didn't even realize that I hadn't even taken my sticks out of my car. And I was like,
Hmm.
man, I've been busy, man. I haven't even hit a bucket in a while. And I used to do that, out of habit. Um, but since my competitive days in high jumping, for me, my knees, I can't do it.
Hmm.
I'm like, I'd rather golf or do something else, fun. You have switched your focus from the endurance to the shorter stuff. And which events are you competing in now? You threw out casually the 400, and then you mentioned the high jump. Have you done any multis, or are you just picking and choosing every
No,
fall? Or
no. I mean, even even trying for two events is a lot at my age, and I'm best in the high jump by ranking. I
Mhm.
think I'm top 10 or ninth in America last year in the 55s, and I'm amazed that I can be up there. So I really work hard at it, and I can still bend over the bar and hope to get
Mhm.
better. And then in the 400, it's probably my best track event, and I'm not quite competitive with the top guys there yet, but I certainly have the potential, especially with my endurance background. But
Right.
speaking of goals, I finally learned the hard way, Troy. My number one goal by far is don't get injured. And then number two, three, four, and five, don't even matter. And then number six, I'll start putting up, my high jump meters or my times.
Yeah.
But the main battle that I've found transitioning from lifelong endurance athlete and moving at, steady pace to actually trying to be explosive is it's tough. And you got to be really careful with the training progressions and all those things that I'm
Mhm.
learning more about, like listening to your show and talking to experts like Cynthia and Lion
Mhm.
Martinez, the world record holder who just broke the Masters 4,500-meter record, ran a 10:72 last
Wow.
year. An amazing performer. And I had a
Mhm.
great interview with him on my podcast. He's given me some great insights, and it's so inspiring to see what people can do in Masters competition because, again, most of us are accustomed to having our athletic peak in whatever age group that was, and teens or 20s, and then the rest of it's like a steady decline. Where I think there's some comedian punchlines where it's like, in our 20s we played flag football, in our 30s we switched to bowling, then our 40s we switched to golf, and it
Yeah.
goes on to less and less. We're going to be lawn bowling when we're
Right.
80, and
Right.
I'd rather advocate that we can still get out there and do things that are safe and highly promoting of general overall health as well as longevity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this again, shameless plugs here, but why don't you tell all of us, because I don't even know what your podcast is and where we can get that. Is it on a bunch of different platforms, and what's the name of it, Brad?
Sure. Yeah, it's called the Be Rad Podcast. Pretty easy to remember.
Right.
And I'd love for you to jump over there and listen to some shows. You can listen to Cynthia's show because you mentioned her. We had a great interview, or Lion Martinez if you're interested in masters track and field. But I
Hmm.
have leading authors and experts on all facets of healthy living, peak performance, longevity. And I also do a lot of individual shows where I'm just narrating on a certain topic, and they're
Hmm.
shorter duration, and you can get the gist of what this whole thing about cold exposure is
Hmm.
really quickly with some actionable tips and a lot of content about diet and cleaning up your diet and keeping it simple and understanding the most important big picture insights and sorting through some of the hype, confusion, and controversy. And same with, basic fitness goals, where a lot of the leading researchers and experts that I talk to are now arguing strongly with great research supporting this, that just moving more in general everyday life is a higher priority than adhering to a devoted fitness regimen, which is pretty
Right.
shocking because you
Right.
think, yeah, I do CrossFit a couple days a week, and I lift weights on the other day, and so I got it dialed. But if you're then sitting on the subway for an hour and working
Yeah.
in an office and then coming home and sitting on the couch for hours,
Right.
there's an actual medical condition known as the active couch potato syndrome,
Wow.
whereby people who are devoted fitness enthusiasts who stick to the regimen, and they're found at the 6 a.m. spinning class at the gym, and they're hitting those numbers, they're running their 30 miles a week, whatever, but otherwise lead sedentary lifestyles, are subject to the same disease risk factors
Wow.
as people who are generally sedentary.
That's amazing.
So the objective to just get up and walk around more and take frequent breaks from prolonged periods of stillness will help with things like fat loss
Yeah.
and cognitive function and keeping insulin resistance and those disease patterns at bay, just as much or perhaps even more urgently than going and slamming out some impressive workouts. The Weekend Warrior is the classic
Uh,
where, I used to play adult league basketball because my kid got tired of me beating up on the fourth and fifth graders at practice. He goes, "Dad, you should join a league with the adults." I'm like, "Okay,
right.
okay, I will." And then I came back, and by the time they're in eighth grade, they're blowing me off the court, so I couldn't play with them
Right.
again anymore. But these guys will show up, and you could tell they got an excellent game, and they were probably high school stars, and maybe even played a little beyond that.
Right.
But they walk out onto the court with completely deficient general fitness competency, and
Right.
they're huffing and puffing after 38 seconds of the game. They can
Yeah.
still sink the three-pointer with a beautiful J, but it's like, dude, what are you doing between
Yeah.
last Wednesday night's game and this Wednesday night game
Right.
besides sitting on the couch and working on that spare tire? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing you say that, because I tell my kids this. I'm a PE teacher first. This is the job that I enjoy the most, being a coach and everything,
Mm,
and all these things that go with it. But as a PE teacher, I'm trying to get some very sedentary Americans, the ones that you've been talking about earlier. I've got class loads of kids that are just so inactive. The
yeah.
athletes have already been recruited to sports, so the ones that I'm left with in regular PE are not highly motivated athletes. They're just kind of going through the drudgery, and I'm like, hey, if I can get you, number one, exposed to something that you like to do that's active, that would be a
Mm,
good thing. So, whether it's frisbee golf or whether it's pickleball or, something that you could possibly do that you enjoy, I sometimes I don't even like trying to teach them any rules because they don't like rules. They'll make up their own game. They'll,
Mm,
get four on a side and they keep the ball rallying. I'm like, hey, if you're having fun and you're running around, great.
hmm.
So I tell my kids, I tell them the example every day. I said, look, there's a lot of Americans that cannot get up off their couch to go to the mailbox and come back without their heart threatening to explode. So when you think that you don't need to be active, you're not realizing the years that you're going to start taking off your life. And I said, my mom and dad, hello to Paula and Val out there. They're living in San Diego. They get up every morning at 7 o'clock. They're up earlier than that because they'll tell you like typical old people that they go to bed early and they get up early. But
Mm,
they get up every morning and they're both in their late 70s and they walk for an hour around San Diego down, they live in Hillcrest, so they're right next to Balboa and right next to
mm,
the zoo. And they just get up and walk for an hour around downtown. And my mom still looks pretty much the same. She's looked all her life. She was a competitive roller skater and she taught aerobics and went to Jane Fonda's classes. And, she plays tennis 3 times a week and she's super fit. And, and like you said, she doesn't just come home after all of that and sit on the couch. My mom sits and watches TV with little arm weights and
mm,
she's doing her stuff. And, my dad goes to his workout in addition. Um, but basically, I think what's keeping them healthy is the hour in the morning and the hour in the evening walk because they're moving around, like you said, and it's not high intensity. So they're not doing any joint damage, right? They're not, because that's
mm,
one thing I learned studying kinesiology was the fact that, you know, walking was better than jogging and sprinting was actually better than jogging because of the
mhm,
even keel bounce, right? It's better to sprint than it is to jog, and it's better to walk basically than it is to jog because you're not jarring, everything and bothering your spine and all that good stuff. Brad, I could talk to you for another hour. This has been fantastic. I'm so stoked that we got this done. But it's a Friday, and I'm gonna let you get on with your active social life. But let's do it again. First of all, maybe we'll do one of the first times in over a year. Get another person, and I'd love to get Cynthia if she would consent and get the three of us talking on the same podcast. I would love to chew on your ear a little bit. It sounds like you're a much more accomplished podcaster than myself. And I'd like to do some of that stuff. And then you let me know when you want to do some jumping. I have not been as busy at Santa Monica, but I still I'm on good terms there. I also work at Redondo. So I don't know, you said we met at the one at Santa Monica. So um, those are really the only ones close to out here. But you didn't say exactly where you were. You just said Southern California. So where are you
Yeah,
located?
I visit there often, so I'm gonna look you up, man. We're gonna do some high jump practice, and I'm also studying your great course. So I really appreciate you putting out all this helpful information for the millions of high jumpers out there in the world that want to get better.
Yeah, well, it is a passion. Super stoked. Every 4 years, obviously, we got the Olympics coming up, so there's
Mm,
all kinds of opportunities. And even though I abhor the way that they're covered, um,
yeah, tell me
still
about
love
it.
I still
Yeah.
love everything to do with it, and I've learned so many great things and life lessons and everything else watching, you know, both Winter and Summer Olympics. And, part of it for me, like you talked about the passion and everything, but I hate the way that's covered because I don't think that they realize how hard people work to get there. I was like, you don't
Mhm.
understand. It's like for someone else that's watching, they go, oh yeah, yeah, they're in the Olympics. I'm like, no, you don't just go to the Olympics. First of all, you have to work your butt off to get there. You have to have some
Yeah.
talent. You might need a couple breaks. You hear all kinds of great stories about, guys like the British triple jumper who first time he went came in dead last or pretty
Mm,
close to it and then just kept getting better. I
mm,
forget his name, but he went from I think he went four in a row, so over a 12-year period, right? So if you went, say it was 2000, then 2004, 2008, and 2012. So from 2000 to 2012, you could get 4 Olympics, right? You do that.
Wow.
Right. He went to
Yeah.
4 Olympics. He went, Jonathan Edwards. Okay. He went like 20, finished 23rd, and then he finished 12th, and then he finished fifth, and then he won it, and you're like, dude, not only are you awesome because you went to 4 Olympics in a row, but he got better each time, mastered his craft, and eventually won the gold medal. Those are the kinds of stories. As another one, I remember watching as a kid, and this tells you how old I am. It was in 1972. I was 8 years old. First Olympics my mom showed me, Summer Olympics in Munich, and there was a Japanese guy on the rings. It was
Mm.
gymnastics competition, the team. Back in those days, it was Japan and Russia all the time. The
Hmm.
Americans weren't that good. Our men's team still isn't that good. It's usually the women now. But it was the Russians against the Japanese. And it was basically the last guy, and he had to get like a 9.5 or whatever it was for them to win the team gold. And they go, yeah, this is, and I don't think it was Sukahara, but that's a Japanese name where a guy had a trick named after him. But they always name it after whoever invented it, right? Well, this guy had a crack in his
Hmm.
tibia or his femur. I don't remember which, but and they knew it, and they couldn't substitute anybody. And this guy does his whole ring routine, and you're like, oh, no problem, right? So he's up and he's doing his rings, and they're perfect. And but here comes the dismount, man, and he's got to stick the landing on his broken leg, and the dude just pops the landing down. You see him put the hands on. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, like, done. I remember watching that. I just get chills when I think of it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that is the Olympics. And it's like whatever it takes, man. It's like I have trained my ass off for 4 years or 10 years or whatever, and I'm sticking that landing. And if my leg breaks and it falls off, we're gonna win the gold.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff. So I get passionate about it. I love watching it, and anything that I could do to be involved in it, from training an athlete to get there. Barbara Bachaka is one of my clients, and she's the #1 jumper in Canada. And I'm
Hmm.
just like, when are you coming down to train, man? We got things we got to do. She's like, I'm gonna be there in February. I'm like, okay, because
All
we got to
right.
get all these things done, and we got to get you to jump these heights so we can go. I want to go to the Olympics. I didn't get to go, but I still want to go. So
Right
shameless
on.
plug. Shameless plug.
Yeah, man. Keep it up, Troy. I appreciate your
Hey,
work. Thanks for having
Brad,
me on the show too.
absolutely. We'll stay in touch. I got you there on Instagram, and we'll do it, man. I got plenty of time to do that with you. That'd be
All
a
right.
gas.
Thanks for having
Awesome.
me.
All right. Thanks again, man. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And that's going to wrap it up here with us on another episode of Raise the Bar. We just got finished talking with Brad Kearns, and wow, what a lot of energy from that young man. He is he is just going a million miles an hour. An amazing background as an athlete, and then continuing on at high levels in new athletic pursuits. He's got a wealth of information on nutrition and how to better your life, both if you're not an athlete, how to eat better and improve the quality of your life, and then how to eat better and improve the quality of your athleticism. So, um, for Brad, again, thank you so much. That was just a lot of fun. I had a blast talking with Brad. And for those of you that don't want to listen all the way through again and want to hit the high points, you can find Brad at Brad Kearns. That's at Brad Kearns, KEARNS1 on Instagram. He's got 55,000 followers. He's got information here on protein, podcasts, iMac, Mac Butter courses, YouTube, all kinds of things here. His podcast is called B.Rad, Brad, right? B.Rad Podcast. And he didn't tell us what platforms those are on. So I'm just going to hit the podcast button here and see what comes up. I see podcast, listen here, hashtag Brad podcast at JF Wellness. I don't know which ones these are. There you go. If I push on listen here, it says visit link bradkearns.com. and it gives you a bunch of information there. And if you hold that, it will just pop up on Instagram and take you to the next step. So get the BRAD email newsletter and free books. I'm in all kinds of information. Great guy. I'm looking forward to doing future podcasts and helping him with his high jump technique. So until next time, this is Troy Haines signing off. Another fun episode of Raise the Bar with our guest, Brad Kearns, and we will see you next time.